We're back. We're back online. Voice, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Voice, 1, 2. And we're back. I think. There. Well, that's just unfortunate, isn't it? Sorry about the Wi-Fi. I think I'm back now. Another chance with the Arabian Nights. Connection should be stable now, I hope. If you can hear me, give me a sign if you want, and if you don't, I'm gonna just keep reading. But I think we are back online. Oh, thank you as always, Blinka. Alright, we're good to continue. The porter, half asleep and heated with wine he had drunk, was much disturbed at these words, and without rising he said to the calender who had spoken, casting at the same time a fierce look at the three, "Seat yourselves, and meddle not with what does not concern you. Have you not read the inscription over the door? Do not pretend, then, to make the world live after your fashion, but live according to ours." "My good friend," replied the calender, who had been the cause of this outbreak, "do not be angry, but we should be very sorry to give you any cause. On the contrary, we are ready to receive your commands. The quarrel would not have ended here had not the ladies interfered and pacified the disputants." When the calendars were seated, the sisters helped them to meat and drink, and the delighted Safiye in particular took care to supply them with wine. When they had both eaten and drinking as much as they wished, they intimated that they should be happy to give their entertainers some music if the ladies had any instruments, and would order them to be brought. One sec, my head is in pain from the... A way to relieve that pain from... Why does that hurt so much? Maybe I should have to get it back. I look like an egg. Oh well. The ladies accepted the offer with pleasure, and the beautiful Safiye immediately got up to procure some instruments, and returning to the next moment offered the calenders a native flute, another used in Persia, and a tambourine. Each calender received from her hand the instrument he liked best, and they all began to play a little air. The ladies were acquainted with the words, which were very lively, and accompanied the air with their voices, frequently interrupting each other with fits of laughter caused by the nature of the words. In the midst of the entertainment, and when the party were in high good humor, they heard a knock at the door. Safiye immediately left off singing and went to see who was there. "But I must now inform you, my lord," said Scheherazade to the Sultan, "that it is proper for your majesty to know how anyone came to knock so late at the door of the house. The Caliph Harun al-Rashid made a frequent practice to go through the city in disguise during the night, and in order to discover whether everything was quiet and orderly. On this evening, therefore, the Caliph had set out from his palace, and at his accustomed hour, accompanied by Giafar, his Grand Vizier, and Mesrour, chief of the eunuchs. All three were disguised as merchants. In passing through the streets where these ladies lived, the prince heard the sound of the instruments, interspersed with laughter, and said to this vizier, 'Go and knock at the door of that house, where I hear so much noise. I wish to gain admittance and learn the cause of it.' The vizier endeavored to persuade the caliph that they were only women who were making merry that evening, and that the wine seemed to have exhilarated their spirits, and that the caliph ought not to expose himself, for it was probable he might meet with some insult. Besides, At the time, he said, was improper. And it was useless to disturb the amusements of the people. Nevertheless, said the Caliph, knock as I order you. It was then the Grand Vizier Giafar. Giafar. The Grand Vizier Giafar, who had knocked at the door by order of the Caliph, who wished not to be known. Safiye opened it, and the Vizier observed by the light of the candle she carried that she was very beautiful. He played his part very well. He first made a profound reverence, and then with a respectful air, he said, Madam, we are 3 merchants of Mosul. We arrived here about 10 days ago with some very rich merchandise, which we have deposited in a khan. We have taken up our lodging. We have been to spend the day with a merchant of this city who had invited us to go see him. He entertained us very sumptuously, and as the wine we drank put us into very good humor, he sent for a company of dancers. The night was already far advanced, and while we were playing on our instruments, the company was dancing, and all were making a great noise. The watch happened to pass by and oblige us to open the door. Some of the guests were arrested. We, however, were so fortunate as to escape by getting over a wall. But, added the Vizier, as we are strangers and have taken perhaps rather more wine than we ought, we are afraid of meeting with a second party of the watch, or perhaps with officers from whom we escaped, before we arrive at our khan, which is still a long way off. And even if we escape the khan in safety, the gate would be shut, and whoever may come will not be admitted till morning. This is the reason, madam, that in passing by, when we heard the sound of instruments and voices, we thought all those who belonged to the house had not yet gone to rest, and we took liberty to knock, to beg you to afford us a retreat till the morning. If we appear to you worthy of taking part in your amusements, we will endeavor as far as we are able to contribute to the enjoyment of the evening, and thus to make amends for the interruptions we have caused. If we appear unworthy, grant us at least that we may pass the night under the shelter of your vestibule. During the speech of Jafar, the beautiful Safiye had an opportunity of examining the Vizier and his companions, whom he called merchants like himself, and judging from their countenances that they were not common men, she said that she was not a mistress. But if they would be patient for the moment, she would return and bring an answer. Safiye went and related all to her sisters, who hesitated some time as to what they ought to do. But they were naturally kind, and as they had shown the same favor to the 3 calendars, they resolved to permit these merchants also to come in. The Caliph, the Grand Vizier, and the chief of the eunuchs, being introduced by the beautiful Safiye, saluted the ladies and the calendars with great civility. They, supposing the visitors to be merchants, returned their salute in the same manner, and Zobeide, as the principal person, said with a grave and serious air which well suited her, You are welcome, but in the first place, do not take it ill if we ask of you one favor. What favor, cried the Vizier, can we refuse to such beautiful ladies? It is, replied Zobeide, to have eyes but no tongues, to forbear to ask questions about what you may see, or to strive to learn the cause, and to be silent about what does not concern you, lest you should hear what will not be pleasant to you. You shall be obeyed, madam, replied the Vizier, for we are neither censurers nor indiscreet, inquisitive persons. It is enough for us to attend to our own business without meddling with what does not regard us. After this, they all seated themselves, and the conversation became general, and they drank to the health of the new guests. While the Vizier Jafar entertained them with his conversation, the Caliph could not refrain from admiring the extraordinary beauty, the great elegance, the lively disposition, and agreeable spirit of the ladies, while the appearance of the 3 calendars, who were all blind of the right eye, surprised him very much. He wished to learn the cause of this peculiarity, but the condition the ladies had imposed upon him and his companions prevented any inquiry. Moreover, when he reflected upon the richness of the appointments and furniture, and the regularity and arrangement everywhere apparent, he could hardly persuade himself the whole scene was not the effect of enchantment. The conversation having fallen upon the various sorts of amusement and the different modes of enjoying life, The calendars got up and danced in the peculiar way, and their skill, while it greatly increased the good opinion the ladies had already conceived of them, attracted also the applause, and approbation of the Caliph and his company. As soon as the calendars had finished their dance, Zobeide got up, and taking Amine by the hand, said to her, "Come, sister, the company shall not think that we will put them under any restraint, nor shall the present prevent us from doing as we have always been accustomed to do." Amine, who perfectly understood what her sister meant, rose and took away the dishes, tables, bottles, and glasses, and the instruments on which the calendars had played. Nor did Safier remain idle. She swept the hall, but everything in its proper place, snuffed the candles, and added more aloe wood and ambergris. Having done this, she requested the three calendars to sit on the sofa of one side, and the Caliph and his companions to take their places on the other. "Get up," said she, then turning to the porter, "and be ready to assist us in whatever we want to do. A man like you, as strong as a house, ought never to remain idle." The porter had slept till he was somewhat sobered. He got up therefore very quickly, and fastening his cloak to his girdle, cried, "I am ready to do anything you please." "That is well," answered Safier, "and you shall not remain long with your arms crossed." A little while after, Amine came in with a sort of seat, which she placed in the middle of the little room. She then went to the door of a closet, and having opened it, she made a sign to the porter to approach. "Come and assist me," she cried. He did so, and quitting the room with her, returned a moment after, followed by two black dogs, each of which he led by a chain fastened to its collar. These dogs, which appeared to have been very ill used and severely beaten with a whip, he brought into the middle of the room. Zobeide, who was sitting between the calendars and the Caliph, then got up, and approaching the porter, said in a very grave manner, and with a deep sigh, "We must do our duty." She then turned up her sleeves so as to uncover her arms to the elbow, and taking a whip which Safier presented to her, said, "Porter, lead one of these dogs to my sister Amine, and then come to me with the order." The porter did as he was ordered. As he approached Zobeide, the dog which he held began to howl, and turning towards her, lifted up his head in a most supplicating manner. This song does not fit. I'm glad I've tuned in. I forgot to put it on repeat, that's why. Okay. That's far better. I need to make sure to press that button. Jael began to howl, and he was ordered as he approached Zobeide, the dog which he held began to howl, and turning towards her, lifted up its head in a most supplicating manner. Supplicate. I don't know that word either. So we're learning a whole bunch of English this time. Well, I guess I kind of already knew what repast was, but it's cheap. Okay, it was supplication. Does it mean to bow? It said turn his head up. To make a humble entreaty, especially to pray to God. To ask humbly and earnestly of, to ask earnestly and humbly. Supplicate. To ask humbly. Oh, Oh, my time is completely off because of that stream getting closed. We continue on. It's not that big an issue. In a most supplicating manner, but she, without regarding the distressful gestures of the dog, which must have excited pity, or its cries, which filled the whole house, flogged it till she was out of breath. And when she had not strength left to beat it any more, she threw away the whip. Then taking the chain from the porter, she took up the dog by the forepaws. Looking at each other with a melancholy air, they mingled their tears together. Zobeide hereupon took out her handkerchief, wiped the tears from the dog's eyes, and kissed it. Then returning the chain to the porter, she desired him to lead that dog back from whence he had taken it, and bring her the other. The porter carried the one that he had beaten back to the closet. Returning, he took the other from the hands of Amine and presented it to Zobeide, who was waiting for it. "Hold it, as you did the first," said she. Then, taking the whip, she served this dog as she had served the other. She then wept with it, dried its tears, kissed it, and returned it to the porter, who was saved the trouble of leading it back to the closet by the agreeable Amine, who took it herself. The 3 calendars, with the Caliph and his party, were all much astonished at this ceremony. They could not comprehend why Zobeide, after having so violently whipped the 2 dogs, which, according to the tenets of a Mussulman religion, are impure animals, should afterwards weep with them, kiss them, and dry their tears. The guests conversed together about it, and the Caliph in particular was very desirous of knowing the reason of an action, which appeared to him very singular. He made signs to the vizier to inquire, but that officer turned his head the other way, till at last, importuned by repeated signs, he inquired by a very respectful gesture, intimating that it was not yet time to satisfy his master's curiosity. Zobeide remained for some time in the middle of the room, as if to rest from the fatigue of beating the 2 dogs. "My dear sister," said the beautiful Safiye, "will you not return to your place, that I may also perform my part?" "Yes," replied Zobeide, and she seated herself on the sofa, with the Caliph, Giafar, and Mesrour on her right hand, and the 3 calendars and the porter on the left. The company continued for some time silent. At length, Safiye, who had placed herself on the seat in the middle of the room, said to Amine, "Sister, rise. You understand what I mean." Amine rose and went into a different closet, and that once the dogs had been brought, she returned with a case covered with yellow satin and richly ornamented with embroidery of green and gold. She opened it and took out a lute, which she presented to her sister. Safiye took it, and after having tuned it, began to play upon the lute, accompanying it with her voice. She sang an air of the grief of absence, in so agreeable a style that the Caliph and the rest of the company were enchanted. When she had finished, as she had sung with a great deal of action as well as passion, she offered the lute to Amine, saying, "Sister, my voice fails me. Do take it and oblige the company by playing and singing instead of me." Amine played a little prelude to hear that the instrument was in tune. Then she sang for some time on the same object, but became so affected by the words she uttered that she did not have the power to finish the air. Zobeide began to praise her sister. "You have done wonders," said she. "It is easy to perceive that you feel the griefs you express." Amine had not the time to reply to this speech. She felt herself so oppressed at that moment that she could think of nothing but giving herself air. And opening her robe, she exposed a bosom, not white as one would suppose the beautiful Amine's neck to be, but so covered with scars as to create a species of horror in the spectators. To the person just tuning in, we're reading Arabian Nights. We are at a climactic point in one of the stories. as to create a species of horror in the spectators, but the release thus obtained was of no service to her, for she fainted away. While Zobeide and Saphia ran to assist their sister, one of the calendars exclaimed, "I would rather have slept in the open air than have come here to witness such a spectacle." The Caliph, who heard this speech, approached him and inquired what all this meant. "We know no more than you," replied the calendar. "What?" resumed the Caliph. "Do you not belong to this house? Cannot you inform me about these two black dogs and this lady who appear to have been so ill-treated?" "Sir," said the calendar, "we never were in this house before now, and entered it only a few minutes sooner than you." This increased the astonishment of the Caliph. "Perhaps," said he, "the man who is with you can inform us of some, or can give us some information." The calendar made signs to the porter to draw near, and asked him if he knew why the dogs had been beaten, and why Amini's bosom was so scarred. "Sir," replied the porter, "I swear by the great name of Allah that if you know nothing of the matter, we are all equally ignorant. It is true that I live in this city, but till today I never entered this house, and if you are surprised to see me here, I am not less astonished at being in such company. What increases my surprise," added he, "is to see these ladies living without any man in the house." The Caliph and his party, as well as the calendars, had thought that the porter belonged to the family, and that he would have been able to tell them that they wished so much to know. The Caliph resolved to satisfy his curiosity and risk the consequences. "Attend to me," he said to the rest. "We are 7 men, and here are only 3 women. Let us then compel them to give us the information we request, and if they refuse to comply with a good grace, we can force them to obey." The Grand Vizier, Jafar, opposed this plan, and explained the consequences of it to the Caliph, without discovering to the calendars who his companion was, for he always addressed him like a merchant. "Consider, sir, I beg," said he, "that we have a reputation to preserve. You know on what condition these ladies suffered us to become their guests, and we accepted the terms. What will they say to us if we break the compact? And we should have only ourselves to blame if any misfortune happened to us in consequence of our curiosity. It is not to be supposed that these ladies would require such a promise from us, if they were not able to make us repent any breach of our agreement." The Vizier now drew the Caliph a little aside and spoke to him in a low voice. "My lord," he said, "the night will not last long. If your majesty will have a little patience, I will come in the morning and bring these women before you. When you are on your throne, you may learn from them whatever you wish to know." Although this advice was very judicious, the Caliph rejected it, and desired the Vizier to be silent, declaring he would not wait so long, but would that instant have the information he wished. The next question was, who should make the inquiry? The Caliph endeavored to persuade the calendars to speak first, but they excused themselves. At last they all agreed that the porter should be the spokesman. He was preparing to ask the fatal question when Zobeide approached them. She had been assisting Amini, who had recovered from her fainting, and she had heard them speak in rather a loud and warm manner. She said to them, "What are you talking of? What is your contest about?" The porter then addressed her as follows: "These gentlemen, madam, entreat you to have goodness to explain to them why you wept with those dogs after having treated them so ill, and what is the reason that the lady who fainted has her bosom covered with scars? This, madam, is what I have been required by them to ask of you." At these words, Zobeide turned with a haughty and menacing gesture to the Caliph and the calendars. "Is it true, strangers," she asked, "that you have commissioned this man to require this information of me?" They all allowed it to be the case, except the Vizier Jafar, who did not open his lips. Upon this, she replied to them in a tone which showed how much she was offended. "We granted you the favor you requested of us, and in order to prevent any cause of discontent or dissatisfaction on your part, as we were alone, we made our permission of you to stay, subject to one positive condition, that you should not speak about what does not concern you, lest you should hear what would not please you. After we had received you and entertained you as well as we possibly could, you do not scruple to break your word. This probably arises from the readiness with which we granted your request, but that surely is no excuse for you, and your conduct, therefore, cannot be considered as honorable." So saying, She struck the floor with her foot, and clapping her hands 3 times, she called out, "Enter quickly!" A door immediately opened, and 7 strong, powerful slaves rushed in with scimitars in their hands, and each seized one of the guests. They threw the astonished men to the ground, drew them into the middle of the hall, and prepared to cut off their heads. The alarm of the Caliph may be easily imagined. Too late he repented his disregard of the advice of his vizier. The unfortunate Caliph, Jafar, Mesrour, the porter, and the 3 calendars were about to pay with their lives for the indiscreet curiosity. But before they received the fatal stroke, one of the slaves said to Zobeide and her sisters, "High, mighty, and revered mistresses, do you command us to cut their throats?" "Stop," answered Zobeide. "It is necessary that we first question them." Hello to the person just tuning in. We are reading the Arabian Nights. I'm Hallie. We are on the story of the porter, the 3 calendars, and the 5 women from... The unfortunate Caliph, Jafar, Mesrour, the porter, and the 3 calendars were about to pay with their lives for their indiscreet curiosity. Oh, we already read that. Stop, answered Zobeide. It is necessary that we first question them. "Madam," cried the affrighted porter, "in the name of Allah, do not make me die for the crime of another. I am innocent, and they alone are guilty. Alas," he continued, weeping, "we were passing the time so agreeably. These one-eyed calendars are the cause of the misfortune. Such ill-favored fellows would be enough to ruin a whole city. I entreat you, madam, not to confound the innocent with the guilty, and remember, it is much more commendable to pardon a miserable wretch like me, who has never a friend, than to overwhelm him with your power and sacrifice him to your resentment." Zobeide, in spite of her anger, could not help laughing inwardly at the lamentations of the porter. But without seeming to pay any attention to him, she addressed herself again to the others. "Answer me," said she, "and tell me who you are. If you fail, you have only an instant to live. I cannot believe that you are honorable men, or persons of authority or distinction in whatever country you call your own, for if that had been the case, you would have paid more attention to our condition and more respect to us." The Caliph, who was naturally impatient, suffered infinitely more than the rest at finding that his life depended upon the commands of an offended and justly irritated woman. But he began to perceive there were some hopes for him in the rest, when he found that she wished to know who they all were, as he imagined she would by no means take away his life, when she should be informed of his rank. Therefore he whispered to his vizier, who was near him, instantly to declare who he was. But this wise and prudent minister, wishing to preserve the honor of his master, and unwilling to make public the great affront the Caliph had brought upon himself, answered, "We suffer only what we deserve." When, however, in obedience to the Caliph, he wished to speak, Zobeide would not give him time. She immediately addressed herself to the 3 calendars, and observing that they were all 3 blind with one eye, she asked if they were brothers. "No, madam," answered one of them to the rest, "we are not brothers by blood, but only brethren so far as we are all calendars. That is, in pursuing and observing the same kind of life." "Have you," said she, addressing one of them in particular, "been deprived of one eye from your birth?" "No, indeed, madam," he answered. "I became so through a most surprising adventure, from the recital or pursual of which, were it written, every one of us must derive advantage. After this misfortune happened to me, I shaved my beard and eyebrows, and adopting the habit I wear, became a calendar." Zobeide put the same question to the other, who returned the same answer as the first, but the last who spoke added, "May not notification. Hey, thank you for following, Sig Cypher. It's been a while since that happened. I didn't realize how loud that noise was going to be." Where were we? Spoke added, "That you may know, madam, we are not common persons, and to inspire you with some pity for us, we must tell you that we are all sons of kings, although we have never met until this evening. We have had such sufficient time to inform each other of this circumstance, and I can assure you that the kings who gave us birth have made some noise in the world." During the speech, Zobeide became less angry, and told the slaves to set the prisoners at liberty, but at the same time to remain in the room. They, said she, "who shall relate their history to me and explain the motives which brought them to this house shall suffer no harm, but shall have permission to go where they please. But none that refuses to give us this satisfaction shall be spared." So the 3 calendars, the caliph, the Grand Vizier Jafar, the eunuch Mesrour, and the porter all remained on the carpet in the middle of the hall before the 3 ladies, who sat on a sofa, with slaves behind them, ready to execute any order they might receive. The porter, understanding that he would only relate his story in order to be free from the great danger that threatened him, spoke first. "You are already acquainted, madam," he said, "with my history, and with the circumstance that brought me to your house. What I have to relate, therefore, will soon be finished. Your sister engaged me this morning at the place where I take my stand in my calling as a porter, by which I endeavor to gain a living. I followed her to a wine merchant, to an herb seller's, to an orange merchant, and to a shop where all sold almonds, nuts, and other dried fruits. We then went to a confectioner's and to a druggist's, and from thence, with my basket on my head, as full as it well could be, I came here, where you have the goodness to suffer me to remain till now, a favor I shall never forget. This is the whole of my history." When the porter concluded, Zobeide, very well satisfied with him, said, "Arise, and be gone, nor ever let us see thee again." "I beg you, madam," replied he, "to let me remain a little longer. It would be unfair that I should not hear the histories of these men after they had the pleasure of hearing mine." Saying this, he took his place at the end of the sofa, truly delighted at finding himself free from a danger which had greatly alarmed him. One of the calendars next spoke, and addressing himself to Zobeide as the principal person who had commanded them to give an account of themselves, he began the history as follows. And we are now into another story of a story. We go into the history of the first calendar, the son of a king. "That you may know, madam, how I lost my right eye, and the reason why I have been obliged to take the habit of a calendar, I must begin by telling you that I am the son of a king. My father had a brother who, like himself, was a monarch, and this brother ruled over a neighboring state. He had 2 children, a son and a daughter, the former of whom was about my age. When I had finished my education in the king, my father, had allowed me to a proper degree of liberty. I went regularly every year to see my uncle, and passed a month or 2 at his court, after which I returned home. These visits produced the most intimate friendship between the prince, my cousin, and myself. The last time I saw him, he received me with demonstrations of the greatest joy and tenderness. Indeed, he was more affectionate than he had ever yet been, and wishing one day to amuse by great entertainment, he made extraordinary preparations for it." How's the volume? Is it working all right? I think it's going. It's just when I turn my head, I want to make sure that it's actually coming through. I think I need to move it slightly closer. That should be okay. Where was my light? He was more very remained a long time at the table. We remained a long time at the table, and after we had both supped, he said to me, "My dear cousin, you can never imagine what has occupied my thoughts since your last journey. I have employed a great number of workmen in carrying out the design I meditated. I have erected a building, which is just finished, and we shall soon be able to lodge there. You will not be sorry to see it, but you must first take an oath that you will be both secret and faithful. These 2 things I must require of you." The friendship and familiarity in which we lived forbade me to refuse him anything. Without hesitation, therefore, I took the oath he required. "Wait for me in this place," he cried, "and I will be with you in a moment." He did not, in fact, detain me long, but returned bringing with him a lady of very great beauty, and most magnificently dressed. He did not tell me who she was, nor did I think it right to inquire. We again sat to the table with the lady, and remained there some time, talking of different things and emptying goblets to each other's health. The prince said to me, "We have no time to lose. Oblige me by taking this lady with you, and conducting her by yonder path to a place where you will see a tomb, newly erected, in the shape of a dome. You will easily know it as the door is open. Enter there together, and wait for me. I will join you directly." Faithful to my oath, I did not seek to know more. I offered my hand to the lady and followed the instructions which the prince, my cousin, had given me. I conducted her safely to our destination by the light of the moon. We had scarcely arrived at the tomb when we saw the prince who had followed us, and who appeared with a vessel full of water, a shovel or spade, and a small sack in which there was some mortar. With the spade, he destroyed the empty sarcophagus, which was in the middle of the tomb. He took the stones away one by one and placed them in a corner. When he had taken them all away, he made a hole in the ground, and I perceived a trap door in the pavement. He lifted it up and disclosed the beginning of a winding staircase. Then, addressing himself to the lady, my cousin said, "This is the way, madam, that leads to a place I have mentioned to you." At these words, the lady approached and descended the stairs. The prince prepared to follow her, but first turning to me, he said, "I am infinitely obliged to you, cousin, for the trouble you have had. Receive my best thanks for it, and farewell." "My dear cousin," I cried, "what does all this mean?" "That is no matter," he answered. "You may return by the way which you came." Unable to learn anything more from him, I was obliged again to bid him farewell. As I returned to my uncle's palace, the fumes of wine I had taken began to take effect in my head. I nevertheless reached my apartment and retired to rest. On waking the next morning, I made many reflections of the occurrences of the night before and recalled all the circumstances to my recollections of so singular an adventure. The whole appeared to me in a dream. I was so much persuaded of its unreality that I sent to know if the prince, my cousin, had risen. But when they brought me word that he had not slept at home, and that they know not what has become of him, and were very much distressed at his absence, I concluded that the strange adventure of the tomb was too true. This afflicted me very much, and shunning the gaze of all, I went secretly to the public cemetery, or burial place, where there were a great many tombs similar to that which I had before seen. I passed the day in examining them all, but was unable to discover the one I sought. I spent 4 days in the endeavor, but without success. It is necessary for me to inform you that the king, my uncle, was absent during the whole of this time. He had been away for some time on a hunting party. I was very unwilling to wait for his coming back, and having requested his ministers to apologize for my departure, I set out on my return to my father's court, from which I was not accustomed to make so long a stay. I left my uncle's ministers very much distressed at the unaccountable disappearance of the prince, but as I could not violate the oath I had taken to keep it secret, I dared not lessen their anxiety by revealing to them any part of what I knew. I arrived in my father's capital, and contrary to the usual custom, I discovered at the gate of the palace a numerous guard, by whom I was immediately surrounded. I demanded the reason for this, when an officer answered, "The army prince has acknowledged the Grand Vizier as king, in the room of your father who is dead, and I arrest you as prisoner in the name of the new monarch." At these words, the guards seized me, and led me into the usurper's presence. Judge, madam, what was my surprise and grief. This rebellious vizier had conceived a strong hatred against me, and had for a long time cherished it. The cause of his hostility was as follows. When I was very young, I was fond of shooting with a crossbow. One day I carried my weapon to the upper part of the palace and amused myself with it on the terrace. A bird happened to fly up before me. I shot at it but missed, and the arrow by chance struck the vizier on the eye and destroyed the sight, as he was taking the air on the terrace of his own house. As soon as I was informed of this accident, I went and made my apologies to him in person. Nevertheless, he cherished a strong resentment against me, and gave me proofs of ill will on every opportunity. I'm furrowing my brow too much reading this one. I need to unfurrow it, because it's starting to hurt. It's like I gotta... my head's being squeezed. Perhaps it's the hat. Could be the hat. Should be okay. Now that he found me in his power, He evinced his hatred on the most barbarous manner. As soon as he saw me, he ran towards me with looks of fury, and digging his fingers into my right eye, he tore it from the socket, and thus did I become half-blind. But the usurper did not confine his cruelty to this despicable action. He ordered that I should be imprisoned in a sort of cage and carried in this manner to some distant place where the executioner was to cut off my head and leave my body to be devoured by birds of prey. Accompanied by another man, the executioner mounted his horse and carried me with him. He did not stop till he came to a place suited for the fulfillment of his design. I managed, however, to excite his compassion by entreaties, prayers, and tears. "Go," he said to me. "Depart instantly out of the kingdom and take care never to return. If you do, you will only encounter certain destruction, and it will be a cause of mine." I thanked him for the mercy he showed me, and when I found myself alone, I consoled myself for the loss of my eye, with the reflection that I had just escaped a greater misfortune. In the condition to which I was reduced, I could not travel very fast. During the day, I concealed myself in an unfrequented and secret places, and journeyed by night as far as my strength would permit me. At length I arrived in the country belonging to the king, my uncle, and I proceeded directly to the capital. I gave him full particulars of the dreadful cause of my return, and explained the miserable state in which he saw me. "Alas!" cried he, "was it not sufficient that I have lost my son, but must I also learn the death of a brother whom I dearly loved, and find you in a deplorable state in which I see you now?" He informed me of the distress he had suffered from his failure to obtain any tidings of his son, in spite of all the inquiries he had made, and all the diligence he had used. The tears ran from the eyes of this unfortunate father as he gave me this account, and he appeared to me so much afflicted that I could not resist his grief, nor could I keep the oath I had taken to my cousin. In short, I related to the king everything that had occurred. He listened to me with some appearance of consolation, and when I had finished, he said, "Dear nephew, the story you have told me affords me some little hope. I well know that my son built such a tomb, and I know very nearly on what spot it was erected. With the recollection which you may have preserved, I flatter myself we shall be able to recover it. But since he has done this all so secretly, and required you also not to reveal the fact, I am of the opinion that we too only should make the search. That the circumstance may not be generally known and talked of. The king had also another reason which he hid from me for wishing to keep this a secret. This reason, as the conclusion of my history will show, was a very important one. We disguised ourselves and went out by a garden gate, which opened into the fields. We were fortunate enough very soon to discover the object of our search. I immediately recognized the tomb, and was the more rejoiced, as I had once long and so vainly endeavored to find it. We entered, and found an iron trapdoor shut down upon the opening of the stairs. We had great difficulty in lifting it up, because the prince had cemented it down with the lime and the water he carried with him when I saw him last. At length, however, we raised it. My uncle was the first who descended, and I followed. About 50 steps brought us to the bottom of the stairs, to a sort of anteroom, which was full of thick smoke, very unpleasant to smell, and which obscured the light thrown from a very brilliant lamp. From this antechamber, we passed on to one much larger, the room of which was supported by large columns and illuminated by many lights. In the middle of the apartment there was a cistern, and on each side we observed various sorts of provisions. We were much surprised to find no one here. Opposite to us there was a raised sofa with an ascent of some steps, and beyond this appeared a very large bed, the curtains of which were closely drawn. The king went up to the bed, and opening the curtains revealed the prince, his son, reclining upon it with the lady. But both were burnt and charred black as if they had been thrown onto an immense fire, and had been taken off before their bodies were consumed. What surprised me even more than that sight itself was that my uncle did not evince any sorrow or regret at seeing that his son had thus lamentably perished. He spat on the dead face and cried in an angry voice, "Such is thy punishment in this world, but thy doom in the next will be eternal." Not satisfied with this terrible speech, he pulled off his slipper and struck his son an angry blow on the cheek. I cannot express the astonishment I felt at seeing the king, my uncle, treat his dead son in that manner. "Sir," I said to him, "however violent my grief may be at beholding this heart-rending sight, yet I cannot yield to it without first inquiring of your majesty. What crime the prince, my cousin, can have committed to deserve this? His lifeless corpse should be insulted thus." The king replied, "Nephew, I must inform you that my unworthy son loved his sister from his earliest years and was equally beloved by her. I rather encouraged their rising friendship because I did not foresee the danger that was to ensue. And who could have foreseen it? This affection increased with their years and reached such a pitch that I dreaded the consequences. I applied the only remedy then in my power. I severely reprimanded my son for his conduct and represented to him the horrors that would arise if he persisted in it, and the eternal shame he would bring upon our family. I talked to his sister in the same manner, and shut her up, that she should have no further communication with her brother. But the unhappy girl had tasted of the poison, and all the obstacles that my prudence suggested only irritated her passion and that of her brother. My son, convinced that his sister continued to love him, prepared this subterranean asylum under pretense of building a tomb, hoping someday to find an opportunity of getting access to the object of his flame and concealing her in this place. He chose the moment of my absence to force his way into the retreat of his sister, which is a circumstance that my honor will not allow me to publish. After this criminal proceeding, he shut himself up with her in this building, which he furnished, as you perceive, with all sorts of provisions. But Allah would not suffer such an abominable crime to remain unchastised, and he justly punished them both. He wept bitterly as he said these words, and I mingled my tears with his. After a pause, he cast his eyes on me. "Dear nephew," resumed he, embracing me, "if I lose an unworthy son, I may find in you a happy amends for my loss." The reflections with the speech called forth on the untimely end of the prince, and the princess again drew tears from us both. We reascended the same staircase, and quitted this dismal abode. We put the iron trap door in its place, and covered with it earth and rubbish of the building, to conceal as much as possible this dreadful example of the divine anger. We returned to the place before our absence had been observed, and shortly after we heard a confused noise of trumpets, cymbals, drums, and other warlike instruments. A thick dust, which had obscured the air, soon informed us of the cause, and announced the arrival of a formidable army. The same vizier who had dethroned my father and had taken my possession of his dominions now came with a large number of troops to seize my uncle's territory. The king, who had only his usual guard, could not resist so many enemies. They invested the city, and as the gates were opened to them without resistance, they soon took possession of it. They had not much difficulty in penetrating to the palace of the king, who attempted to defend himself, but he fell, selling his life dearly. For my part, I fought for some time, but seeing that I must surrender if I continued to resist, I retreated, and had the good fortune to escape, taking refuge in the house of an officer of the king, on whose fidelity I could depend. Overcome with grief, and persecuted by fortune, I had recourse to a stratagem, as a last resource to preserve my life. I shaved my beard and my eyebrows, and put on a habit of a calender, and thus disguised left the city without being recognized. After that, it was no difficult matter for me to quit the dominions of the king my uncle by unfrequented roads. I avoided the towns till I arrived in the empire of the powerful sovereign of all true believers, the glorious and renowned Caliph Harun al-Rashid. When I ceased to fear, I considered what plan I should adopt, and I resolved to come to Baghdad and throw myself at the feet of this great monarch whose generosity is everywhere admired. I shall move his compassion, thought I, by the recital of my eventful history. He will no doubt commiserate the fate of an unhappy prince, and I shall not implore his assistance in vain. At length, after a journey of several months, I arrived today at the gates of the city. When the evening came on, I entered the gates, and after I had rested a little time to recover my spirits and settle which way I should turn my steps, this other calender, who was sitting next to me, arrived also. He saluted me, and I returned the compliment. "You appear," said I, "a stranger like myself." "You are not mistaken," replied he. At the very moment he made this answer, the third calendar, whom you see now, came towards us. He greeted us and stated that he too was a stranger, and had just arrived at Baghdad. Like brothers we united and resolved never to separate. But it was late, and we did not know where to seek lodging in a city where we never had been before. Our good fortune brought us to your door, and we took the liberty of knocking. You have received us with so much benevolence and charity that we cannot sufficiently thank you. This, madam, is what you desired me to relate. Thus it was that I lost my right eye. This is the reason I have my beard and my eyebrows shaved, and why I am at this moment in your company. Enough, said Zobeide. We thank you, and you may retire whenever you please. The calendar excused himself from obeying this last request, and entreated the lady to allow him to stay and hear the history of his two companions, whom he could not well abandon. He also begged to hear the adventures of the three other persons of the party. The history of the first calendar appeared very surprising to the whole company, and particularly to the caliph. The presence of the slaves, armed with their scimitars, did not prevent him from saying in a whisper to the vizier, "As long as I can remember, I never heard anything to compare with this history of the calendar, though I have been all my life in the habit of hearing similar narratives." The second calendar now began to tell his story, and addressing himself to Zobeide, spoke as follows. The history of the second calendar, the son of a king. I'm gonna take a water break for this one. The music's rather peaceful now that I can actually hear it. Having the microphone always plugged into my earphones. Not as fun, I think. Now that I can actually hear it, it sounds decent. I hope that the voice is carrying through the way I hope it does with all this new tech. But I tried a few recursions on the stream, and it sounded like it was coming through decent, so hopefully it's still doing that. Almost at the 2-hour mark. It sure doesn't feel like that. This one went by a lot faster. Probably got another 15 minutes in me. I know you tend to go to bed around this time, Plinka. And I don't really see a point in broadcasting to 0 viewers, so when you're done, I'll probably be done as well. I may stay on a little longer and mess with some of my settings, but other than that, I probably won't read to a crowd of 0. But a crowd of 1, it's very different. Oh, I dropped my water. Glad it fell. Face. Though I must say, I am surprised you've come here with such consistency. I'm not complaining. I'm flattered, actually. I can see why people like streaming. It feels nice to give entertainment or repose to other people. Oh, you'll be here for a while. You may outlast me. I may have to leave before you're actually gone. I've only been doing this for 2-ish hours at a time, but I'm enjoying the stories right now, so maybe they'll carry me a little longer. I may take a break to catch some food. Actually, I may do that right now. I think I'll take a short break for food. That way I have energy to continue. Cool. So I'm used to this pop filter and this stand. It's very fancy stuff to me. Alright, I'll be right back. check, and we are back. We are here again. Okay. Had a slice of pizza. Should provide long-lasting carbohydrate energy. What is the fish emote called? I don't understand all these emojis. Oh, pogfish. Yes. Very pogfish in it. The quality wasn't that bad. Something my roommates prefer, thankfully. Got a bit of I got a bit of dried pineapple. I like dried fruit. I'm not making a trend of eating on stream. We're not a food ASMR stream. We never will be. I cannot stand that kind of thing. Make sure I eat far off and away from the mic so that it doesn't catch the chewing. Because I can't. I hear maybe 3 seconds of that and I have to turn it off or go somewhere else. It's I can't do it. I don't understand the people that can. It's grating to the ear. I don't know why I ever put ASMR on my tags, because I'm never doing ASMR. It's I can't read at that volume in a way that's engaging. I can't do the noises because the scratching the mic, the chewing, the mouth noises, those things, they don't give me anxiety, but they give me disdain. I don't know the words exactly to describe it, but I can't. If it makes your ears happy, then it is what it is. But mine will never be like that. I can't do it. Okay. A little more energized. Took a few steps out. Keep on with the reading. We are on the second calendar. I'm going to look up what calendar means because I don't actually know what they mean when they write calendar. Okay. Mendicant. So it's a member of a Sufic order of wandering mendicant dervishes. So Sufic is a branch of Islam called Sufism. It's a Muslim mysticism. You can compare it to the Kabbalah in Judaism. You can compare it to the Gnostics in Christianity. The Gnostics, they're the mysticism, but the Gnostics are a very different thing. Mendicant is a beggar, so they wander around and they get alms as their way of surviving. And then dervish. What is a dervish? That word sounds familiar. A member of a Muslim religious order, noted for devotional exercises, such as bodily movements leading to a trance. Okay. So a calendar is a member of a specific Sufic order. They are wanderers, and they're known for their rhythmic movements, their dancing ability, because it puts them in a trance. Hello, second viewer. I'm Hallie. We are reading the Arabian Nights, and we are continuing with the story of the second calendar, Son of a King. We just went over the first calendar, Son of a King. A calendar is a member of a Sufic order Sufic being Sufism, and they are mendicant dervishes. Mendicant being beggar, dervish being someone who dances themselves into a trance, as a method of similar to prayer, similarly used as prayer. To obey your commands, lady, and that you may understand the strange adventure by which I lost my right eye, I must give you an account of my whole life. I too am a prince by birth. I was scarcely more than an infant when the king, my father, observing that I possessed great quickness of intellect, began to devote great pains to my education. He summoned from every part of his dominions the men most famous in science and for their knowledge of the fine arts, that they might instruct me. I no sooner knew how to read and write than I learnt by heart the whole of the Koran, that admirable book in which we find the basis, the precepts, and regulations of our religion. That my knowledge might not be shallow and superficial, I pursued the works of the most approved authors who have written on that subject, and who have explained and illustrated the Quran by their commentaries. To this study, I added an acquaintance with all the traditions received from the mouth of our Prophet by those illustrious men who were his contemporaries. Not satisfied with possessing a deep and extensive knowledge of our religion, I made particular study of our histories and became master of polite literature, of poetry and versification. I then applied myself to geography and chronology, and was anxious to attain knowledge of our own language in its greatest purity, and all this I effected without neglecting the manly exercises in which a prince should be proficient. It was in calligraphy, however, that I most delighted, and at length I excelled in forming the characters of our Arabic language. I surpassed all writing masters of our kingdom, even those who had acquired the greatest reputation. Fame bestowed upon me even more honor than I deserved. She was not satisfied with spreading a report of my talents through the dominions of the king my father, but even carried the account of them to the court of the Indies, whose powerful monarch became so curious to see me that he sent an ambassador bearing the richest presents to my father, with the request that I would visit him. This embassy, for many reasons, delighted my father. He felt assured that it was the best possible thing for a prince of my age to travel to foreign courts, and he was very well pleased with the opportunity of forming a friendship with the Sultan of India. I set out with the ambassador, but I had very few attendants and little baggage on the account of the length and difficulties of the way. We had been about a month on our journey when we saw in the distance an immense cloud of dust, and soon afterwards we discovered 50 horsemen well armed. They were robbers and approached us at full speed, as we had 10 horses laden with our baggage and the presents which I was to take to the Sultan in my father's name. And as our party consisted but of very few persons, you may easily imagine that the robbers attacked us without hesitation. Unable to repel force by force, we told them we were ambassadors of the Sultan of India, and that we hoped they would do nothing contrary to respect they owed to him. With this appeal, we thought, we should preserve both our equipage and our lives, but the robbers insolently answered, "Why do you suppose we shall respect the Sultan your master? We are not his subjects, nor even within his realm." Having said this, they immediately surrounded and attacked us on all sides. I defended myself as long as I could, but finding that I was wounded, and seeing the ambassador and all our attendants overthrown, I took the advantage of the remains of strength in my horse, which was also wounded, and escaped from them. I pushed the poor creature on as far as he would carry me. He then suddenly fell under my weight, quite dead from fatigue and loss of blood. I disentangled myself from the fallen steed as fast as possible, and finding that no one pursued me, I supposed the robbers had their attention engrossed by the plunder they had seized. Thus I was left alone, wounded, destitute of every help, in a country where I was an entire stranger. I was afraid to return to the high road from the dread of the falling once more into the hands of the robbers. I bound up my wound, which was not dangerous, and walked on for the rest of the day. In the evening I arrived at the entrance of a cave. I went in, ate some fruits which I had gathered as I came along, and passed the night in the cave quite unmolested. For some days I continued my journey, without coming to any place where I could rest. At the end of about a month I arrived at a very large city, populous, and most delightfully and advantageously situated, for several rivers flowed round it, and the climate was like a perpetual spring. The number of agreeable objects which presented themselves to my eyes excited in my bosom so great a joy that it stilled for a moment the bitter regret I felt at my miserable position. My whole face, my hands, and my feet were at a brown, tawny color, for the sun had quite burnt me, and my slippers were so completely worn out by walking that I was obliged to travel barefoot. Besides this, my clothes were all in rags. I entered the town in order to hear the language spoken, and thence to find out where I was. I addressed myself to a tailor who was at work in his shop. I must let go of the page. Struck by my youth and by a certain manner about me, which intimated that my rank was higher than my appearance betokened, he made me sit down near him. He asked me who I was, whence I came, and what had brought me to that place. I concealed nothing from him, but informed him of every circumstance that happened to me, and did not even hesitate to reveal my name. The tailor listened to me very attentively, but when I had finished my narration, instead of giving me any consolation, he increased my anxieties. "Beware," said he to me, "how you impart to anyone else the information you have given me. For the prince who reigns in this kingdom is the greatest enemy of the king your father, and if she should be informed of your arrival in this city, I doubt not but he will inflict some evil upon you." I readily believed that the tailor spoke sincerely when he told me the name of that prince. But as the enmity of my father and that king has no connection with my adventures, I shall not enter into any detail of it. I thanked the tailor for the advice he had given me, and told him that I had placed implicit faith in his good counsel, and should never forget the favor he had shown me. As he supposed I must be hungry, he brought me something to eat, and even offered me an apartment at his house, and I accepted his hospitality. Some days after my arrival, the tailor, remarking that I was tolerably recovered from the effects of my long and painful journey, and knowing that most of the princes of our religion take the precaution to make themselves acquainted with some art or trade, that they may be prepared in case of a reverse of fortune to guard against want, not what. Some of the letters in my book are faded, like the print was not perfect, sadly. So sometimes I have to look at a word twice to make sure I'm actually pronouncing it correctly. This time, I did not. It is not wot, it is want. Asked me if I knew anything by which I could earn a livelihood, without being chargeable to anyone. I told him that I was well versed in the science of laws, both human and divine, that I was a grammarian, a poet, and above all, that I wrote remarkably well. "All this," he replied, "you will not in this country procure a morsel of bread. This kind of knowledge here is entirely valueless. If you choose to follow my advice," he added, "you will procure a short jacket, and as you are strong and hardy, you may go into the neighboring forest and cut wood for fuel. You may then go and offer it for sale in the market, and I assure you that you may gain a comfortable little income that shall keep you independent of everyone. By these means, you will be enabled to wait till heaven shall become favorable to you, until the cloud of bad fortune which hangs over you and obliges you to conceal your birth shall have blown over. I will furnish you with a cord and a hatchet." The fear of being known and the necessity of supporting myself determined me to pursue this plan, in spite of the degradation and labor it involved. The next day, the tailor brought me a hatchet and a cord, and also a short jacket, and recommending me to some poor people who obtained their livelihood in the same manner, he begged that I might be allowed to go with them. They led me to the forest, and from that day I regularly brought upon my head a large bundle of wood, which I sold for a small gold coin, current in that country. For although the forest was not far off, wood was nevertheless dear in that city, because there were few men who gave themselves the trouble of going to cut it. I soon acquired a considerable sum, and was enabled to repay the tailor that he had expended on my account. I had earned my livelihood thus for more than a year. When happened one day to go deeper into the forest than usual, I came to a very pleasant spot, where I began to cut my wood. In cutting up the root of a tree, I discovered an iron ring fastened to a trap door of the same metal. I immediately cleared away the earth that covered the door, and on lifting it up, I perceived a staircase by which I descended with my hatchet in my hand. When I came to the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a vast palace, which struck me very much by the great brilliancy on which it was illuminated. Indeed, it was as light as if it had been built on the most open spot above ground. I went forward along a gallery, supported on columns of jasper, with bases and capitals of massive gold, but I stopped suddenly on beholding a lady, who appeared to have so noble and graceful an air, and to possess such extraordinary beauty that my attention was removed from every other object, and my eyes fixed on her alone. That this beautiful lady might not have the trouble of coming to me, I made haste to approach her, and while I was making a most respectable obeisance, she said to me, "What are you, a man or a genie?" "I am a man, madam," I answered, rising, "nor have I any commerce with genii." "By what chance," she asked, with a deep sigh, "do you come here?" "I have remained here for more than 25 years, and during the whole of that time, I have seen no man but yourself." Her great beauty, which had already made up a deep impression on me, together with the mildness and good humor with which she received me, gave me courage to say, "Before, madam, I have the honor of satisfying your curiosity, permit me to tell you that I feel highly delighted at this unexpected interview, which offers me both a means of consoling myself under my own affliction, and perhaps of making you happier than you are now." I then faithfully related to her my strange adventures, assured her that she saw in me the son of a king, told why I appeared to her in that condition, and explained how accident had discovered to me the entrance into the magnificent prison in which I found her, and of which to all appearance she was heartily tired. "Alas, Prince," she replied, again sighing, "you may truly call this rich and superb prison unpleasing and wearisome. The most enchanting spots cannot afford delight when they are detained in them against our will. Is it possible you have never heard anyone speak of the great Epidammarus, king of the Ebony Isle, a place so called from the great quantity of that precious wood which it produced? I am the princess, his daughter. The king my father had chosen for my husband a prince who was my cousin. But on the very night of our nuptials, in the midst of the rejoicing held by the court in the capital of the Isle of Ebony, and before I had been given to my husband, a genie carried me away. I fainted almost at the moment when he seized me, and lost all recollection, and when I recovered my senses, I found myself in this place. For a long time I was inconsolable, but habit and necessity have reconciled me to the sight and company of the genie. 25 years have passed, as I have already told you, since I was brought to this place, in which I must own that the bare expression of a wish procures me not only everything necessary for life, but whatever can satisfy a princess who is fond of decoration and dress. Every 10 days, continued the princess, the genie comes and passes the night here. He never sleeps here oftener, and gives as a reason that he is married to another lady, who would be jealous of the infidelity of which he was guilty, should it come to her knowledge in the meantime. If I have wished for his presence, I have only to touch a talisman, which is placed at the entrance of my chamber, and he comes. It is now 4 days since he was here, and I have therefore to wait 6 more days before he again makes his appearance. You may thus remain 5 days with me, and keep me company if it is agreeable to you, and I will endeavor to regale and entertain you as befits your merit and quality. I should have thought myself but too happy to obtain so great a favor by asking it. The more unhesitatingly did I therefore accept the hospitality thus obligingly offered. The princess then conducted me to the most elegant, convenient, and sumptuous bath you can possibly imagine. When I came out, I found, instead of my own dress, a very rich suit, which I put on, less for its magnificence than to render myself more worthy of my hostess' notice. We seated ourselves on a sofa, covered with superb drapery, and cushions of the richest Indian brocade. The princess then set before me a variety of the most delicate and rare dishes. We ate together, and passed our time very agreeably in one another's company. This is a trait you'll see in other, what do you call it, domains of writing. This is reminiscent of French salons in the Rococo period and Baroque period as well. If you're familiar with any of Moliere's works, great movie actually, based on the life of Moliere, and it features a few salons. A salon is or it was a place where wit and creation intermixed to make an entertaining atmosphere for the patrons of the salon. There would be people who hosted the salon and people who would come to please the host. Sometimes there was a gender dynamic where it was used as a way to find suitors, but other times it was used as a place simply to exchange wit, to exchange art, so it's like a house party without music or TV. But definitely drugs. There was alcohol and some opiates involved in salons, no doubt. I don't know how hard the drugs were in the Rococo era, but I don't think they had cocaine or crack or methamphetamine, but I don't think those things are used very commonly in what you would call a modern day salon, other than maybe cocaine. But I don't know. I've never been to that kind of thing. What do you think I am? I'm not some rich bastard. I'm just renting out a room and we're reading books. Anxious to devise every method of entertaining me, she produced the next day at dinner a flask of very old wine, the finest I ever tasted. And to please me, she drank several glasses with me. So soon as my head became heated with this agreeable liquor, I said, "Beautiful princess, you have been buried here alive much too long. Follow me and go enjoy the brightness of the genuine day, of which for so many years you have been deprived. Abandon this." What is this face? What is this face? This is a drunk face. In New York. These emojis are foreign to me in their entirety. I don't understand their purpose or meaning. What is this face for? I see robot faces. Oh, there's a creep. Just a funny cat. I see. Your use of these things mildly confuses me. Does that make me a boomer? I'm just not too familiar with Twitch chat emojis. We'll figure it out eventually. For now, we figured out the mic stand. We figured out the ambient music. We figured out ambient campfire. We figured out the volume we need to speak at. So as far as the quality of voice goes, we're doing good. As far as quality of camera goes, we can't fix that. Sadly, I don't have the internet connection to make a stronger connection. Hello to the person that just came in. I'm Hallie. We are reading the Arabian Nights, or 1001 Nights, whichever way you know it. We are on the story of the second calendar, the son of the king. But right now we're discussing the purpose of emojis because I am unacquainted and frankly ignorant to basically every emoji that exists on Twitch chat. Put up a mic stand. Very happy with myself. It didn't actually take that long. I shouldn't have put it off as long as I did, but it is now up. No more problem. We have a pop filter. Hopefully it works. I will have to look at the VOD afterward, and hopefully it does. We continue. Abandon this false glaring light that surrounds you here. She answered, smiling. Prince, let us talk no further on this subject. I value not the most beautiful day in the world if you will pass 9 with me here, and give up the 10th to the genie. Princess, I replied, I see very well that it is dread for you to have the genie which makes you speak in this fashion. As for myself, I fear him so little that I am determined to break his talisman in pieces, with the magic spell that is inscribed upon it. Let him then come. I will confront him, and however brave, however formidable he may be, I will make him feel the weight of my arm. I have taken an oath to exterminate all the genii in the world, and he shall be the first to feel my vengeance. The princess, who knew the consequence of this conduct, conjured me not to touch the talisman. It will be the means, she said, of destroying both you and myself. I am better acquainted with the nature of the genie than you can be. But the wine I had drunk prevented me from understanding the propriety of her reasons. I kicked down the talisman and broke it to pieces. This was no sooner done than the whole palace shook, as if ready to fall to atoms. This earthquake was accompanied by the most dreadful noise like thunder, and by flashes of lightning which deepened the intermediate darkness. The terrible appearance in the moment dissipated the fumes of the wine from my brain, and made me own, though too late, the fault I had committed. Princess, I exclaimed, what does all this mean? Without thinking of her own pure peril, and fearful only for me, she answered in great alarm, Alas, you are undone unless you save yourself by flight. I followed her advice, and my fear was so great that I forgot my hatchet and my cord. I had hardly gained the staircase by which I descended when the enchanted palace opened and the genie entered. What has happened to you, and why have you called me? He demanded of the princess in an angry tone. She replied hastily, A violent pain my tongue is not cooperating now. I ate too much. That has to be it. Perhaps the pineapple. A violent pain obliged me to search for the bottle, you see. I drank 2 or 3 glasses, and unfortunately, making a false step, I fell against the talisman, which I thus broke. This is the whole matter. At this answer, the genie, in the utmost rage, exclaimed, Shameless and deceitful woman, how then came this hatchet and this cord here? I have never seen them, replied she, and curiosity. That's a word we're going to have to look up. Impetuosity. Impetuosity. I think it means impatience. The quality or state of being impetuous. You gotta love redundant definitions. Marked by impulsive vehemence or force and violent. So impatience, but first by your rage, your physical created rage that goes to the actual world. Impetuosity. Impetuosity. The king's staircase will matter shameless to perhaps. Impetuosity taken up and passing through some place, and have brought them here without being aware of it. The genie replied only by reproaches, and by blows, of which I could plainly distinguish the sound. It distressed me beyond measure to hear the cries and sobs of the princess. Impetuosity, thank you. Who was being thus cruelly used. I had already taken off the habit which she had made me put on, and resumed my own, which I had carried to the staircase the day before, after I had been in the bath. I proceeded up the stairs and felt the more penetrated with grief and compassion as I considered myself the cause of this misfortune, and felt an ungrateful, most beautiful verity of an implacable genie. I of myself, that she for 25 years, but expecting liberty. She had everything to make her happy, accepting liberty, accepting being exception of liberty, not accepting it like into yourself. But accepting liberty, she had everything to make her happy. My conduct has put an end to her and against the cruel hate of a merciless demon, and returned to the wood, even knowing so much was at what had happened. Taylor expressed great concern. You're right, he has cost me on account of the secret of your birth, with which you have entrusted what to fear someone. God is that you are coming. I thanked him for his sympathy, but to inform him of anything that had happened. Did I tell him the reason why I returned without my hatchet and cord? I retired to my chamber, where I reproached myself 1,000 times for my great imprudence. Nothing, I cried, could have equaled the mutual happiness of the princess and myself if I had been satisfied and had not broken the talisman. While I was abandoning myself to these afflicting thoughts, the tailor entered my apartment and said that an old man, a stranger, had brought my hatchet and cord she had found on his way. Your companions, added the tailor, who went to cut wood with you, have told him that you live here. Come and speak to him, as he wishes to deliver the hatchet and cord into your own hands. At the speech, I trembled from head to foot. The tailor inquired the cause of my emotion. I was about to reply when suddenly the floor of my chamber opened. The old man, who had not the patience feared, and presented himself to us with a hatchet and cord. This old man was in fact the genie, who had carried off the beautiful princess of the Isle of Ebony, and who had thus come in disguise, after having treated her with the greatest barbarity. I am a genie, he said to us, a son of the daughter of Eblis, prince of the genii. Is not this thy hatchet? Added he, addressing me. And is this not thy cord? The genie gave me no time to answer these questions, nor indeed should I have been able to reply, as his dreadful appearance took away all my presence of mind. He seized me by the middle of my body, and carrying me out of the chamber, sprang into the air and rose me upwards the clouds with such rushing velocity that I seemed to feel great height to which I ascended, before I was aware of the distance I had traveled in a very short space of time. He then descended towards the earth, and having caused to open, by striking his foot against it, he sank into it, and myself in the enchanted palace, and in the presence of the beautiful princess of the Isle of Ebony. But alas, what a sight! It pierced my inmost heart. This princess was covered with blood and lay prostrate on the ground, more dead than alive, with her face bathed in tears. Perfidious wretch. Perfidious. This is another word you're gonna write. Do this one if I'm acting rape. Perfidy. Record is an actor instant loyalty. We may have looked this word up once already. Themes you will continue to encounter in Arabian Nights because it is the whole basis of the story. The whole reason Shahryar comes in Shahryar's care because his wife did on him. Right, so he started. Perfidious wretch, said the genie, holding me up to her. Is not this the I not? Have I ever seen him tell this? What, I cried. Dare you him, although he is the cause of your punishment, chastised you? If he is a stranger to me, she replied, do you wish me to utter a falsehood which will prove his destruction? Well then, exclaimed the genie, drawing his scimitar and off, you have never seen him? Take this off his head. Alas, she answered, how can I do what you require of me? My strength is so exhausted that I cannot lift up my arm. And were I able, do you think I could put to death an innocent person, whom I do not know? This refusal, then, added the genie, completely proves to me your crime. And then turning to me, he said, Are you too acquainted with her? I should have been the most ungrateful and most perfidious of men. Perfidious. If I had not preserved the same fidelity towards her which she had shown towards me, I therefore said, how should I know her, when this is the first time I have ever set eyes upon her? If that is true, he replied, take the scimitar and cut off her head. It is the price of liberty. Any way to convince you have never seen her before, as you affirm. With all my heart, I answered, and took the scimitar in my hand. Do not, however, imagine that I approached the beautiful princess of the Isle of Ebony for the purpose of becoming the instrument of the genie's barbarity. I did it only to show her by my actions, as well as I could, that as she had the courage to sacrifice her life from love of me, I could not refuse to give my own life to save hers. The princess understood my meaning, and in spite of her pain and suffering, gave me to understand by her looks that she should willingly die, and was well satisfied to know that I was equally ready. The said to eternally condemn all men that are not only not lady, ready to fight. You may treat me as you please, for I am in your power, but I will never obey your barbarous commands. Said the genie, that both of you brave my rage and insult my jealousy, but you shall find what I can do by the manner in which I shall treat you. At these words, the monster took up the scimitar and cut off one of the hands of the princess, who had barely time to bid me an eternal farewell with the other, before the great loss of blood from her former wounds, increased by this last outrage, extinguished her life, not 2 moments after the perpetration of this last cruelty, at the sight of which I fainted. When I recovered my senses, I complained to the genie for allowing me to remain in expectation of death. Strike, I cried, I am ready to receive the mortal wound, and expect it from you the greatest favor you can bestow. In line with my request, I have seen how suspect you here. I would this instant annihilate you, but I shall content myself with changing to an ass, a lion, or a bird. Make your choice. I wish not to control you. I said, moderate, O powerful genie, your wrath, and since you have decided to spare my life, grant it to me a generous manner if you pardon me. I shall always remember your clemency, and you will act like as one of the best of men pardoned his neighbor that bore him a most deadly envy. The genie asked me what had happened between these two neighbors. I told him, if he would have the patience to listen to me, I would relate the history. The history of the envious man and of him who is envied. We are now, what is that, 3 layers in? Scheherazade telling the tale of the porter. Porter met the calendar's relaying a tale. Relaying his tale, and is now relaying a tale in that tale. I was excited when I got back. I don't mind it per se. It's very consistent, at least with the fact that it goes into these tangents of deeper stories. They get less dialectic and more didactic the deeper they go. It's like the morals become clearer and the dialogue becomes less frequent. It's one person, or the message, it's like it becomes more like Aesop's fables, where there's a clear moral at the end of the story when they go into these deeper layers. Like how the fisherman and the genie, when the fisherman was sitting atop of the genie's jar, he was just relaying to him tale after tale of moral goodness, being like, don't betray me. It doesn't work out for people who betray him. God will smite you. And now here we have the calendar doing it to a genie. Seems like it happens a lot to genies. But I think I'm at the end of my rope for tonight. We did a little better this time. We hit 2.5 instead of just 2 1/4. So we'll try and get that up to a solid 3 hours. maybe Friday. Could probably pull that off rather easily, but for now, I think I'm gonna call it. I think I'm done for the night. Thank you for tuning in as always. Should we end it on a note of Keats? Maybe we should end with some Keats. I feel bad for only reading one story the whole time. Let's find a good poem of Keats, and then we'll stop there. I don't really like Happy as England. Let's do... We'll do To Sleep. Rather fitting for the end of the night. To sleep. O soft embalmer of the still midnight, shutting with careful fingers and benign our gloom pleased eyes, embowered from the light, and shaded in forgetfulness divine. O soothe this sleep, if it so please thee, close, in midst of this thine hymn, my willing eyes, or wait the amen ere thy poppy throws around my bed its lolling charities. Then save me, or the passed day will shine upon my willow, breeding many woes. Save me from the curious conscience that still lords its strength for darkness, burrowing like a mole. Turn the key deftly in the oiled wards, and seal the hushed casket of my soul. He's praying that he falls asleep so he doesn't have to be battered by conscience. The reason we sleep. To escape the torture that is thinking. Yes. Keats himself. Well, we'll tune out there. I think To Sleep is probably the best poem we could stop on. Have a good night. I will be back Friday. Probably gonna read more Arabian Nights. And maybe we'll dive into the Bhagavad Gita. But I need to look into how to pronounce some of the words before I do that, because there's many names that are dropped one after the other. But anyway, for next time, signing off.